The garden was silent, save for the dry rustle of leaves against the soil. Leo sat on the stone bench, his knees drawn up, his gaze locked onto the underside of a single milkweed leaf. He had been there since the light began to shift, waiting for the transformation. Hanging from the stem was a pale, translucent chrysalis. It looked still at first glance, but Leo leaned closer, his breath held steady. There, a pulse. It was a rhythmic, mechanical twitching that shook the entire leaf. The casing tightened and relaxed, as if something inside were pressing against the walls with deliberate, repetitive force. Leo shifted his weight, the gravel crunching under his boots. But he did not look away. The air around the milkweed felt heavy. He reached out, his hand hovering inches from the stem, then pulled back, letting the creature work in isolation. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the path, but the rhythmic movement continued, unceasing and desperate. The garden held its breath with him. Inside the casing, the movement shifted from a pulse to a frantic, uneven thrashing. Leo leaned in until he could see the faint, dark outline of wings pressing against the translucent wall. The chrysalis tilted sharply, then snapped back, the milkweed stem bowing under the weight of the effort. It was a slow, agonizing process. Every time the creature pushed, the shell seemed to hold firm, refusing to yield. Leo watched the wall of silk stretch and thin, revealing the wet, crumpled texture of the wings beneath. They were folded tight, trapped in a space that offered no room to expand. The creature paused, its movements slowing to a rhythmic, weak vibration, before launching into another desperate surge of energy. Leo felt a sharp ache in his own shoulders as he watched. He reached out, his fingers twitching in sympathy with the insect. The sun continued its descent, while the creature remained locked in its silent, exhausting battle. Leo did not blink. The minutes dragged, each one marked by the same futile cycle. The butterfly pushed, the shell held, and the creature slumped back into the cramped, dark space. Leo watched the wings, now visible through the thinning silk, appear more sodden and lifeless than before. A knot of tension tightened in his chest, a sharp, physical reaction to the creature's inability to break free. He shifted on the bench, his jaw set, his eyes narrowing as he tracked the lack of progress. Why was it not working? The creature seemed to be losing its rhythm, its movements becoming erratic and shallow. Leo felt a surge of restless empathy, a desire to reach out and clear the path that seemed so needlessly blocked. He leaned forward, his face inches from the milkweed, watching the tiny, wet limbs claw uselessly against the inner wall. The sight was becoming unbearable. He felt the weight of the creature's exhaustion as if it were his own. Every failed attempt sent a jolt of irritation through him, a sharp impatience with the natural order of the garden. He stood up, his legs stiff, his gaze never leaving the chrysalis. The silence of the garden now felt oppressive. Leo stood, the grass crunching beneath his boots. The stillness of the garden felt like a taunt. He looked down at the milkweed, then back at the path, his hands trembling slightly. He needed to end this. The sight of the creature, trapped and failing, had become a physical weight he could no longer carry. He reached into his deep pocket, his fingers brushing against loose change and lint before finding the cold, hard edge of the sewing scissors. He pulled them out. The metal caught the fading afternoon light, a sharp, silver flash against the dull green of the leaves. He held them tightly, the blades pressed together, feeling the resistance of the spring-loaded handles. They were small, precise, and dangerously sharp. He tested the tension with his thumb, the steel biting into his skin just enough to remind him of their purpose. He looked at the chrysalis again, his gaze hardening. He took a breath, his knuckles white, and positioned the blades at the very top of the silk casing. Leo held his breath, the world narrowing down to the thin, vein-like texture of the chrysalis. The blades hovered, trembling slightly as they met the silk. He did not wait for another pulse of movement. He pressed the handles together. The metal bit through the casing with a sharp, dry snap that echoed in the quiet garden. The top of the shell sheared away instantly, falling like a discarded husk onto the dirt below. The interior tension, once held by the walls of the cocoon, vanished in a heartbeat. The butterfly tumbled forward, pushed out by the sudden lack of resistance. It landed heavily on the milkweed leaf, exposed and vulnerable. The creature lay there, its form uncoiling in the open air for the first time. It was a sudden, violent liberation, stripping away the safety of the shell in one clean motion. Leo pulled the scissors back, his hand still vibrating from the force of the cut. He watched the creature, expecting it to stand, to shake off the remnants of its confinement. But the butterfly remained motionless, its body sprawling across the leaf. Leo leaned in, his eyes searching for a sign of life. The butterfly lay on its side, a wet, crumpled mass against the green leaf. Its body appeared bloated, unnaturally thick and heavy. The wings, which should have been unfolding, remained shriveled and thin, clinging to its back like wet tissue paper. There was no rhythmic pulsing, no attempt to right itself. It was completely still. Leo reached out with a blade of grass and nudged the creature's thorax. It did not grip the stem. It did not flutter. It only twitched once, a weak, involuntary spasm that died out before it could even finish. He waited, his pulse hammering in his ears, watching for the sun to hit the wings and trigger the expansion he had anticipated. Minutes stretched into an agonizing silence. The wings stayed matted and limp, showing no sign of hardening or strength. The creature was trapped, not by a shell, but by its own broken form. It was a hollow victory. Leo looked at the motionless insect, then at the empty space where the chrysalis had been. The expected flight was not coming. The afternoon light began to shift, casting long, thin shadows across the milkweed. The butterfly remained exactly where it had fallen, a silent, crumpled shape on the leaf. It was completely unresponsive to the cooling air. A few inches down the stem, a black ant emerged from the soil. It moved with purposeful, jagged steps, its antennae flickering as it sensed the scent of the exposed, defenseless creature. Leo watched, his breath hitching as the ant bypassed the stem and began to climb. The insect did not react. It lacked the strength to pull its wings tight, or even to shift its weight away from the approaching predator. Leo reached out to brush the ant away, but stopped. He realized that even if he saved it from this threat, the creature was already lost. It was a prisoner of the very mercy he had forced upon it. The ant reached the edge of the leaf, its mandibles clicking in the quiet. The butterfly did not flutter. It simply lay there, a fragile, broken thing, unable to escape the smallest danger. Leo pulled his hand back, the weight of his error finally settling into his bones. Leo looked down at the small sewing scissors resting in his palm. The metal was cold, catching the fading light of the late afternoon. He shifted his gaze back to the discarded, hollow shell lying on the dirt path. It was a jagged, empty ruin now, stripped of its purpose. The silence of the garden felt absolute, pressing against his ears. He traced the lines of the empty casing with his eyes, and the truth arrived with the force of a physical blow. The struggle he had so carelessly interrupted was not a prison. It was a forge. He understood now that the intense pressure of the cocoon was the only mechanism capable of forcing the vital fluid from the creature's body into its wings. That resistance was the catalyst for flight. By removing the obstacle, he had effectively removed the strength. He had traded the butterfly's future for a moment of misguided pity. The weight of his error settled deep into his chest, heavy and immovable. He watched the creature, now still as stone, and saw the consequence of his interference etched into his shriveled, useless wings. He had played God with a life he did not understand, and the cost was absolute. Leo opened his fingers. The scissors hit the dirt with a dull metallic thud, sinking slightly into the soft earth. He did not pick them up. He did not look back at the tool that had become the instrument of his failure. The evening chill began to seep into the garden, turning the air crisp and biting. The butterfly remained motionless on the milkweed, its form already cooling as the light retreated from the leaves. Leo stood still for a long moment, listening to the wind stir the tall grass. He understood now that he had been a spectator to a process he was never meant to influence. Some battles are not meant to be won by others. They are meant to be endured by the self, a necessary trial to grant the power of flight. He turned his back on the garden, his boots crunching against the gravel path as he moved toward the gate. Each step felt deliberate, heavy with the weight of his newfound clarity. He left the quiet, green space behind, carrying the somber truth that interference is often the greatest form of harm. He walked until the garden was nothing more than a shadow against the horizon, his pace steady, his mind fixed on the silent, hard-won lessons of the natural world. He would not return. He had learned that strength is not given, but forged in the pressure of the struggle, and that some paths must be walked entirely alone.